The desert was too quiet for a man with a shovel and a broken heart. Jedediah Jed Holt stood under the withering heat of a setting sun, the wind whispering through creosote and thornbrush. His sweat-stained hat lay beside a pile of stones, and his boots were half buried in the sand. The grave was nearly done 3 feet deep, maybe a little more. It didn't need to be perfect. The dead wouldn't mind. The dead he buried today wasn't someone he loved. It wasn't even someone he knew. It was a coffin-shaped memory, a farewell to everything he had been. He drove the spade in one last time, leaned on the handle, and looked to the horizon, empty. Like his soul, 3 months ago, Jed was a rancher, with a wife named Eliza and a daughter, Millie, who loved to chase fireflies. Then came the fever. First Millie, then Eliza, then silence. Jed sold the cattle, burned the house, and rode west with nothing but guilt in his saddlebags. Arizona territory, he'd heard, had places where a man could disappear, and if not disappear, then maybe at least be forgotten. He finished the grave, stood back, and read from a torn scrap of paper Eliza had once written on. It was a poem she loved. His voice cracked on the last line. To dust we return, but love lingers like wind in the canyon. He dropped the paper into the hole, followed by a single locket inside it, Millie's tiny handprint. Then he pushed the dirt back in, his arms aching from more than the labor. Jed stayed there a long while, the desert darkening around him. Coyotes howled in the distance. The stars blinked to life. Then he heard it. Not a howl, not wind, not some cursed memory. A sound like crying. He turned, every muscle taut. Was it the wind? A fox? A ghost? No. Under a tumble of sagebrush half-covered in rags was something moving. Jed moved slowly, boots crunching on gravel. He parted the brush with his calloused hands, and there it was. A baby, wrapped in worn blankets, skin sunburned and lips cracked, barely breathing. Its dark eyes fluttered open and met his. He stared, blinked, shook his head. This ain't real, he muttered. But it was in the very place he dug a grave to bury his past. The desert had given him a child. He didn't know whose. He didn't know why. He only knew this child had survived something awful. And for the first time in months, Jed Holt felt something stir deep inside his chest, something he thought he buried with that locket. Hope. Jed Holt didn't move at first. The baby lay in a hollow beneath the brush, its breath shallow, its little hands curled into fists as if still fighting whatever had left it there. The crying had stopped, replaced by faint whimpers. The wind blew sand across Jed's boots, but he didn't feel it. All he could feel was the pounding of his own heart. Where the hell did you come from? He whispered. He knelt slowly, careful not to startle the child. The baby's skin was raw from the sun, the blankets no thicker than an old flour sack. Jed reached out, hesitated, then touched the child's chest warm. Still alive. Barely. He scooped the baby up gently, awkwardly, like he was holding something too fragile for this world. The child made a faint sound, a wheeze, or a hiccup. Jed noticed a necklace tangled in the cloth. Too big for the baby, it looked like a woman's, a turquoise pendant on a leather cord, broken at one end. It didn't mean much to him yet, but he tucked it into the blanket anyway. Jed stood up, scanning the vast desert. Nothing. No wagon tracks, no smoke, no campfires, just endless sage and stone. Whoever left this baby had vanished, or worse. He carried the infant back toward his horse, tethered under a rock outcrop nearby. The chestnut mare, Dusty, nickered when she saw him. Yeah, Jed muttered, I wasn't expecting this either. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen. He poured a bit into his palm and gently touched it to the baby's lips. The child sucked weakly, then coughed. Jed sighed in relief. He glanced toward the grave. He had just filled his own self-dug ending, and now he was holding something that had just begun. This ain't coincidence, he thought. This is something else. Jed mounted up with the baby held tight against his chest. He wasn't sure how long the child had been out there. Hours, a full day. If there were other survivors, they'd be long gone, or buried by the desert like so many others. He rode toward the mountains, toward a place he'd heard of in town, Dry Creek Crossing. It wasn't much, just a speck on the map, a general store, a stable, a one-room doctor's office. But it was the only place within 50 miles where a sick baby had a chance. As they rode, Jed talked to the child like he used to talk to Millie when she was still in swaddles. You got no name, huh? Well, I guess I didn't have one either for a while. After what I lost. The baby shifted in his arms, eyes fluttering shut. He kept riding, slower now, careful not to jostle the fragile bundle. I was fixin' to end things out there. Dug the hole and everything. Figured I'd say goodbye and just, he paused. Then you showed up. The desert gave you to me, like it was telling me not to quit just yet. The sun had fallen by the time Dry Creek came into view. The town's lone lantern glowed outside the general store, swinging in the breeze. A stray dog trotted past the saloon's porch. Not a soul else stirred. Jed dismounted carefully and wrapped the baby tighter. He climbed the wooden steps to the doctor's office, knocked once. Then again, harder. Lights flickered inside. A moment later, the door creaked open. An older man in spectacles and a nightshirt squinted out at him. Dr. Miles, Jed said. Got a sick baby here. Found him alone out in the brush. The doctor's brows lifted. Alone, Lord have mercy. Bring him in. Inside, the air smelled of herbs and old wood. The doctor cleared off a table, motioned for Jed to lay the baby down. He worked quickly, checking the baby's breathing, hydration. Skin, he's weak, dehydrated, maybe a day or two out there. Any idea who he belongs to? Jed shook his head. Not a clue. Just me and that baby out there. Dr. Miles looked Jed up and down. Then I suppose he's yours now. Jed stared down at the child, chest rising and falling under the lantern. Light. He didn't know where the road was leading, but he knew he wasn't alone anymore. By morning, Dry Creek Crossing had come to life. The sun crept over the hills, painting the buildings in gold and fire. Chickens scratched at the dirt behind the store. Smoke curled from the chimney of the blacksmith's hut, and an old woman swept the saloon steps with slow, practiced strokes. But what caught everyone's attention was the man walking out of Doc Miles' clinic with a baby in his arms. Jed Holt could feel the weight of their stares, curious glances from behind curtains, questions forming behind quiet conversations. Dry Creek didn't see many strangers, and a stranger carrying a baby one that wasn't his was bound to stir whispers. He stepped off the boardwalk and headed toward the general store. Baby wrapped tight in fresh cloth the doctor had given him. The child had taken a little goat milk during the night, and while still weak, he'd survived the dark hours, something that gave Jed a strange, unfamiliar hope. Inside the store, a bell jingled as he entered. A middle-aged woman in a long skirt looked up from behind the counter. Her name tag read MRS Clayton. She blinked at the sight of him and the baby. Don't suppose you're here for jerky and tobacco, she said dryly. No, ma'am, Jed said. Looking for milk, a bottle if you got it, and something soft for this little one to sleep in. Mrs. Clayton stepped around the counter and peered at the child. Her stern face softened. Lord above, what's his name? Don't rightly know, Jed admitted. Found him in the desert, out near the old ridge, couple miles south. She looked him over, assessing everything in a single glance. The worn boots, the dirt-streaked shirt, the look in his eyes, and, you're keeping him, Jed hesitated. Wasn't planning on it. But he was given to me, ma'am. Don't feel right to walk away. Mrs. Clayton studied him a second longer, then gave a short nod. Wait here, she returned with a soft wool blanket, a clean glass bottle, a tin of goat milk powder, and a second-hand bassinet. It's paint-chipped but still sturdy. She laid it all on the counter. That ought to do for now, she said. You stayin' long, not sure. Jed said, depends how this little one fares. Mrs. Clayton's eyes lingered on the baby, who gave a soft whimper. Well, if you're stayin' at all, you'll need a place. I was thinkin' the livery may be bed down in the hayloft, Jed said. Nonsense. The rooms over the saloon are cleaner than they look. Tell Sadie Clayton I said to give you the back one for $2 a week. And don't let her charge you more. You're Sadie's older sister, she said. Now go on. That child needs rest. Jed left the store feeling the strangest thing, like maybe, just maybe, the dessert hadn't cursed him after all. Maybe it had handed him a second shot. He crossed the street and entered the saloon. The interior was dim, with rays of light breaking through dusty windows. A few ranch hands sat nursing coffee, boots propped on tables. Behind the bar stood a red-haired woman in her 40s, eyes sharp as hawk feathers. You must be the stranger with the baby, she said before he even reached the bar. Mum, he nodded. Your sister sent me. Said there's a room upstairs, $2 a week, clean sheets, no nonsense. She narrowed her eyes. And keep that baby quiet. This place don't take to cryin'. Jed handed over to silver dollars. The room was small, but clean enough. A single window looked out over the street. The bassinet fit just fine near the bed. As Jed laid the baby down and gently adjusted the blanket, something unexpected bubbled. In his chest, something he hadn't felt since Millie died. A flicker of purpose. He sat back, watching the baby's chest rise and fall. I reckon I can't call you boy forever, he murmured. You're gonna need a name. He thought for a long time. Then he remembered a story Eliza used to read to Millie about a brave child who crossed a desert with nothing but hope. He smiled faintly. Caleb, he said softly. That was the boy's name. The baby stirred in his sleep. All right then, Jed whispered. Caleb it is. And in that quiet, dusty room above a saloon in a nowhere town, a cowboy and a baby began to become something else, a father and a son. It didn't take long for the town to start whispering. Dry Creek Crossing was the kind of place where a tumbleweed rolling down the main street could draw a crowd. So when Jed Holt, a silent, rough-edged stranger, walked into town carrying a sunburnt baby, it was only a matter of time before questions echoed louder than boots on a boardwalk. He says he found the boy in the desert, a ranch hand murmured at the saloon, or left someone out there and came back with the kid. Another muttered behind a half-full glass of rye. Even Sadie Clayton, who'd offered Jed the upstairs room, watched him more closely than most. She didn't trust easily, not in a town that had seen too many drifters, too many broken promises. Jed heard the talk. He didn't respond, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know what else to say. The truth was strange enough. Any added details would only make it sound worse. So he kept to himself, mostly by day. He took odd jobs, splitting wood, fixing fences, shoveling manure at the livery. Caleb stayed with Mrs. Clayton while Jed worked, though she never admitted it. The older woman had grown fond of the boy's soft coos and sleepy grins. At night, Jed sat by the bassinet, whittling pieces of scrap wood into little animals, a fox, a pony, a bear, just like he used to make for Millie. He whispered stories to Caleb, hoping the boy wouldn't remember the desert, only the voice that stayed with him after. But one afternoon, something changed. Jed had just returned from fixing a broken hitch rail near the telegraph post when he Saw a stranger in town. The man was tall, clean-shaven, wearing a dark coat despite the heat. He stood at the water trough, pretending to water his horse, but scanning the street with sharp, deliberate eyes. When he looked at Jed, his stare lingered. Jed felt his hand twitch toward the revolver on his hip. The man tipped his hat, polite, but his smile was hollow. Then he turned and walked toward the saloon. Inside, the man ordered coffee and sat near the window. He watched everything, listened to everyone, took no drink, made no small talk. Jed didn't like it. Later that evening, he stopped by the doctor's office to ask a question that had been eating at him since the day he found Caleb. "Doc," he said, "anyone come through here last week? Any women, maybe a wagon or a group?" Dr. Miles scratched his beard. "Now that you mention it, a ranch hand from Carson Ridge stopped in last Thursday. Said he passed a burnt-out wagon trail about 10 miles west of here. Claimed he saw signs of a struggle, maybe even blood." Jed's gut went tight. No bodies, none he could see. Just a child's blanket in the dirt and some boot prints that led off into the scrub. Jed swallowed hard. Could that have been Caleb's family? Could be bandits, the doctor added. Or worse. Plenty of bad men pass through the western stretch this time of year. That night, as the stars flickered over Dry Creek, Jed sat at the window of his room, rocking Caleb gently in his arms. "There's someone looking for you, ain't there?" he murmured. "Maybe someone who wants you back, or someone who wants you gone." The baby stirred in his sleep, curling closer to Jed's chest. "I ain't much, son," he said softly, "but I know how to shoot, and I know how to ride. That'll have to be enough, out in the street." The stranger in the dark coat stood just beneath the saloon's porch light, eyes fixed on the second-story window on Jed, and when he turned to walk away, the shadow he left behind was long and full of trouble. The next morning, Jed woke to silence, and that was the problem. Caleb usually stirred before dawn, fussing until fed, but now the bassinet was empty. Jed shot upright, hand on his pistol, heart pounding like a stampede. Then came a soft knock on the door. He yanked it open. Mrs. Clayton stood there, calm as morning mist, rocking the baby gently. "You left the window open," she said. "I heard him fussing and figured you were bone-tired. Didn't think you'd mind me taking him for a bit." Jed exhaled, relief loosening his shoulders. Thank you. I wasn't expectin'. No one ever expects kindness anymore," she said, handing Caleb back. "But some of us still give it." Jed nodded, much obliged. She hesitated at the threshold. "That man in black asked about you." Jed stiffened. "What did he want?" "Name, where you're from." "Said he was looking for someone who might have passed this way. Man with a child. Claimed to be a U.S. Marshal, but he didn't show no badge." Jed shut the door and locked it after her. He didn't like this. Not one bit. Later that morning, he saw the stranger again, this time outside the livery. The man in black leaned casually against a post, chewing a sliver of wood, eyes never leaving Jed as he approached. Jed adjusted Caleb in his arms and kept walking. "Fine day," the man said. Jed grunted. "Is it?" The man smiled faintly. "Name's Merrick. I'm looking for someone. Thought maybe you could help." "I doubt it," Jed replied without stopping. Merrick took a slow step forward. "Woman and child went missing out near the Painted Hills. Their wagon was found burned. No bodies." Jed paused. "That sounds tragic," he said flatly. "Word is," Merrick continued, "someone found the baby, took him. Might have had good intentions, or maybe he saw an opportunity." Jed turned, narrowing his eyes. "That a threat?" "Not at all," Merrick said, smile never touching his eyes. "Just facts. I'm real fond of facts, and I intend to gather all of them before I leave this dusty place." Jed held his ground. You got proof that child's who you're looking for? No, not yet. But I will. Jed walked away. Inside, the questions clawed at his gut. Could Caleb be the child from the burned wagon? If so, who was Merrick really? A bounty hunter? A killer in lawman's clothing? And why was Jed starting to feel like the child had been delivered to him? For a reason, that night, Jed sat outside the saloon. On the back steps, Caleb sleeping in a blanket beside him. The stars were clear, cold, and endless. Footsteps approached. He didn't turn. "I don't need more questions, Merrick," he said. But it wasn't Merrick's voice that answered. It was Sadie Clayton. "You're drawing trouble," she said, sitting down beside him. "I didn't mean to," Jed said. She lit a cigarette and watched the smoke rise. "That baby's too quiet," she said after a while. "Too still, like he's afraid to breathe loud. He's been through a lot." "So have you," she said, glancing at him sideways. "I see it in your eyes. You lost someone." He nodded. "Wife and daughter. To fever. Buried them myself." Sadie said nothing for a long moment. "I buried a husband during the drought. Died trying to save the livestock. Town preacher said it was God's will. I told him to go to hell." Jed chuckled quietly. She didn't smile. "Point is," she said, "this place is full of ghosts. Everyone walks around carrying the dead in their hearts. But that baby, he ain't dead. And neither are you." Jed looked down at Caleb. The baby stirred, making a soft sound like a sigh. "You gonna run when Merrick presses harder?" Sadie asked. Jed looked up at the stars. "Not this time." She flicked her cigarette into the dirt and stood. "Good. Then maybe this town's got a chance." And with that, she walked back inside. In the quiet that followed, Jed sat alone with the child. But for the first time, he didn't feel alone. He felt watched over, like maybe the desert hadn't given him a burden, but a reason to fight again. That night, Jed couldn't sleep, even with Caleb nestled beside him, wrapped warm in the soft wool Mrs. Clayton had given them. Something gnawed at him sharp and bitter. Merrick was still in town, still asking questions, and Jed had no proof that the man wasn't what he claimed to be. But his instincts, honed from years on the trail and too many betrayals, screamed otherwise. Merrick was dangerous, and he wasn't going away. So as the saloon quieted, Jed packed a small bagged milk, a blanket, a clean cloth, and wrapped Caleb tight. He didn't plan on running, not exactly, but he needed space to think, and he didn't trust the walls around him to stay standing if Merrick pushed harder. He left a note with Sadie, gone for a day. Need open sky and answers. Jay. Then he rode out beneath a pale moon, the baby cradled against his chest. By dawn, Jed reached a rocky outcrop he remembered from his early wandering old widow's bluff. From up there, you could see the desert, stretched for 50 miles, glowing pink in the morning light. It was where he had first thought of dying, and now, strangely, it felt like the only place he could breathe. He made a small campfire beneath a cluster of rocks and fed Caleb carefully from the bottle. The baby sucked greedily, then drifted into sleep on Jed's chest. "You weren't meant to die out there, were you?" Jed murmured. "No more than I was." He leaned back, watching the sky change from gold to blue. In the silence, he thought of Eliza and Millie, their laughter, their final coughs, the shallow graves, the hole he'd dug for himself. And then Caleb. He didn't know if he believed in God anymore, but he believed in moments. And this child arriving right as he was about to give up, that was a moment too big to ignore. By mid-morning, hooves approached from the east. Jed stood slowly, Caleb still sleeping, his hand hovering near his revolver. A horse and rider came into view. "Doc Miles." Jed exhaled. "You lost, Doc." The old man chuckled. "Not hardly. Sadie told me where you might be headed." He dismounted and joined Jed by the fire, eyeing the baby. You were right to be cautious, Doc said. That Merrick fella, he ain't no marshal, asked me for access to your medical file. When I refused, he smiled like it didn't matter, said he'd find another way. Jed's jaw tightened. Then he's hunting the child. Looks that way. I sent a wire this morning, asked a friend down in Bisbee to check the federal registry. No Marshal Merrick listed anywhere in the territory. Jed stared into the fire. So who is he? Doc shrugged. Could be a bounty hunter. Could be something worse. What I do know is this. He's not after justice. Jed looked down at the baby. Then I won't let him have Caleb. Doc nodded slowly. You'll need to make a choice, Jed. You can run and you might keep the boy alive a while longer. Or you can stand and fight, and maybe end this for good. Jed didn't answer at first, but the wind shifted through the rocks, and something in the air, maybe memory, maybe fate, seemed to whisper to him. I ran before, he said. From my pain, from their graves. I'm done running. Doc looked at him, eyes full of something between sadness and pride. Then we better ride back before Merrick makes his next move. As they saddled up, Jed glanced at Caleb one more time, sleeping peacefully in a leather sling across his chest. I don't know what blood runs in you, he whispered, but I know you're mine now. They rode back to Dry Creek at a gallop, dust rising behind them like smoke, storm clouds gathering far to the west. War was coming, and Jed Holt, the man who once dug his own grave, was ready to face it. The wind had shifted by the time Jed and Doc Miles rode back into Dry Creek Crossing. Clouds loomed low and heavy above the town, casting long shadows over the dirt streets. Storm coming, maybe rain, maybe blood. Jed carried Caleb in a sling. Across his chest, wrapped tightly, one small fist resting against Jed's heart. The child slept soundly, unaware of the eyes already watching from behind shuttered windows. The townsfolk knew something was coming, and they knew Jed Holt, whatever else he might have been, wasn't about to leave quietly. He rode straight to the saloon and tied his horse out front. As he stepped inside, all conversation halted. Every head turned. Sadie Clayton looked up from behind the bar, eyes sharp but proud. You gonna do this alone? She asked. Jed set his jaw. Only if I have to. You won't. She reached beneath the bar and set a loaded shotgun on the counter. He's not the only one who knows how to fight. From the back, Mrs. Clayton emerged with her sleeves rolled up and a rifle in hand. That baby cried in my arms. He's got a home here, whether that man likes it or not. Doc Miles stepped forward. He's not a marshal. His name's not on any registry. I confirmed it. He's a fake. A killer, more likely, Jed said. And he's not here for justice. He's here to take Caleb for whoever hired him. Or worse. From outside came the steady, deliberate clop of horse hooves. Merrick. The door creaked open. He stepped inside like he owned the place, hat low, coat brushed clean of trail dust, hand resting on the butt of a revolver. Well, he said, quite a welcoming committee. Jed stepped forward, body angled just slightly, shielding Caleb. You're not taking him. Merrick smiled thinly. You're brave, Holt. Foolish, but brave. I told the men who hired me this baby was likely dead. Turns out I was wrong. They'll be very interested to know he's still breathing. Jed's hand hovered near his hip. Who hired you? Merrick shrugged. Folks with money, landowners, maybe politicians. The child's bloodline's valuable, native on his mother's side, rancher on his father's. The kind of mix that unsettles some people. They'd rather he vanish quietly. Sadie cocked her shotgun. Well, he's not vanishing today. Merrick's smile broke. You all willing to die for him? Jed's voice was steady. I already did. Once. Now I'm living for him for a long moment. No one moved. The wind howled outside. Caleb stirred against Jed's chest and made a soft, gurgling sound. Merrick's hand twitched, but he wasn't fast enough. Jed's revolver was out and fired before Merrick even cleared his holster. The bullet hit center mass. Merrick staggered back, eyes wide in disbelief, and crashed through the swinging doors into the street. He died in the dust he'd meant to bury a child in. The town was quiet after that. No one came for Caleb. No lawman. No bounty hunters. Merrick had been the only messenger sent to erase a life too inconvenient for the men in suits. But Dry Creek had chosen differently. Weeks passed. Jed found work repairing fences, mending wagons, helping the blacksmith. The town had accepted him not because he fought, but because he stayed, because he didn't run. He moved into a small cabin near the creek, where cottonwoods offered shade and frogs sang at dusk. Caleb grew stronger, louder, fussier. He laughed now, gurgled when Jed made funny faces, slept with one fist curled tight in his father's shirt. One warm evening, Jed sat with Caleb in his lap, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and violet. "You know," he said softly, "I was gonna die out here. Dug my own grave. Said goodbye to everything." He looked down at the child. "But you pulled me out of that hole. You gave me a reason." Caleb cooed. Jed smiled. "I don't know if I'm much of a father, but I reckon I'll learn." And as the stars blinked alive over Dry Creek Crossing, a man once lost to grief and sand now found himself rooted not in the past, but in the beating heart of a child who called him back to life. The desert hadn't cursed him. It had saved him.